Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Dennis Robinson, Jr. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships here at Seattle Opera. It's wonderful to see all of you on such a sunny day. Thank you for making it over to the Opera Center. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we at Seattle Opera and our audiences are working, performing, and experiencing opera on the land of the Coast Salish peoples. Since time immemorial, the Coast Salish peoples have been stewards of this land and its waterways and continue to shape the Puget Sound region today. This acknowledgement does not take place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, and it is our collective responsibility to honor, preserve, and know the land we are on. I am not Dr. Naomi Andre. I just want to, while we miss Dr. Andre, she had some commencement responsibilities at UNC, and so she couldn't make it with us, couldn't join us. But you have me, and again, thank you all for coming. I know it's a busy weekend for Seattle Opera, and it's very nice out, so thanks for joining us. So please welcome Kenneth Kellogg, our new ambassador, artistic ambassador here at Seattle Opera. I know that many of you, if not all of you, recognize Kenneth. Kenneth has been seen on the Seattle Opera stage many times over the last few years, including as Malcolm in X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X. Earlier this season in Fafner, as Fafner in Das Rheingold, as the father in Blue in 2022, and the Commendatore in the film Don Giovanni that we did during the pandemic in 2021. So thanks for joining me, Kenneth, and thanks for
having me.
Signing on as artistic ambassador. We're excited for your expanded role here at Seattle Opera.
Thanks, appreciate it.
What is it? What is the artistic ambassador? No, and so
that's a great question.
I'll start by saying, as we finish Dr. Andre's tenure as scholar in residence, we were wondering what was next. And I think the conversation started about bringing the art form closer to our audience, giving them a more intimate look at the art that we are all here to produce. And so we all had conversations, and your name kept popping up. And I think that we all recognize that having an ambassador who is one that is creating and making the art is an important part. And so that is from the Seattle Opera point of view. Yeah. But can you tell us what this role means to you and what you hope to do with it?
Yes. Well, I'll answer that a bunch of different ways. So when you first asked, and the title was Scholar in Residence, like I'm good. Like I'm a scholar. I could be a scholar. But I think artistic ambassador is very fitting. I think the thing that sets apart a scholar from an artist is a scholar deals with a lot of the nuts and bolts of history, and they can give you dates, they can give you times, they can give you all of those things. But what a scholar can't really give you from the perspective of a performer is that unspoken thing that happens between an artist and the audience that really makes the room special. There's something that happens between a singer on stage and an audience member that it's hard to put into words. And I think that's why we keep coming back to the art form, is that unspoken connection that happens between expression and receiving and things that resonate with us. So I think my goal and my hopes as artistic ambassador is to explore that journey of what happens when an artist is trying to express the human condition, and to share that and explore that with the audience, which for me is what makes this art really special.
So I want to back up a bit. Now you're Seattle Opera's artistic ambassador. You've done all these roles at Seattle Opera and many other companies around the country and the world. How did you get into opera? What made you fall in love with this art form in the first place?
Very fitting. So I was a pretty shy kid growing up. Grew up in Washington,
That's
D.C.
surprising. No, I'm
Surprising.
just kidding.
No, it's surprising. And I'm still kind of a reserved person. But there's something that happens when I picked up music, when I was introduced to music. There was just this freedom of expression. I keep going back to it. There was this freedom of expression that I found in music that I couldn't really explain with words. Like, there was a community built around music making in my school. Like, my music teacher was absolutely amazing. Like, she exuded this love for music that was just infectious. And it was that reason that I got into music, because it filled this emotional bucket that I didn't know I needed. And I found, traveling and doing these operas across the world, everyone's emotional bucket needs to be filled. And we often go to art to do that. And I don't think we realize we do it sometimes, but whenever we're feeling emotional about something, we go grab a glass of wine and put on our favorite tunes, and we sit back and enjoy the expression of an artist. And for me to be an artist is to be woven into that fabric of expression of the humanity of people.
What do you think this art form, I'm just trying to dig into what you're saying a little more.
Yeah, of course.
What do you think this art form, why is it still relevant today? How does it connect with our communities and with our audiences? Or why does it still connect?
Yeah. For me, opera is the ultimate art form. It is the one art form that needs all the other art forms to be opera. We need visual artists, we need poets, we need dancers, we need singers, and all of those things are found in opera. And these composers, they wrote these pieces hundreds of years ago, and I think they still resonate with us because they deal with subject matter that hits the core of us. I always say you can find any life condition that you're going through, you can find in an opera somewhere. There's an opera for every life condition that you're going through. And the ones that really resonate with us, that's most often speaks to something that's going on and that's vibrating in our lives. And there are ones that don't resonate with us for some reason or the other, and we don't connect with it because it's not speaking to where we are in our lives and what we need and what we feel.
With you saying all of that, why do you feel that folks are so, that there's this, why do you feel that folks are so afraid of opera? What is it that makes people hesitant to come experience opera? Some people.
Yeah.
Obviously, these folks aren't those people.
There are a lot of barriers to the entry of opera. There's socioeconomic reasons, there's political reasons, there's lack of exposure reasons. There's a lot of various reasons, and I think that's part of my job as an artistic ambassador is to break down some of those barriers, and explore what it really means to be an artist in the world, and explore what opera really can mean to people. We don't have music in schools anymore. We don't have music education programs in school, which is often the entry point for a lot of people who don't know that opera is an option for them as a career. There's a lot of people who don't really care about the art form because the art form isn't speaking to them. Or where they are in their lives. And that's also my job as an artist and artistic ambassador, is to find a way to bridge that human connection with the art form and people where they are in their lives.
With that being said, what do you think some of those barriers are? I I think you mentioned one, which is arts education.
Yeah.
We know that arts education is lacking in so many of our schools,
Yeah.
not just music, but all arts education. And so students aren't being exposed to arts as much, although Seattle Opera performed for 18,000 kids this year.
That's great. Yeah.
Most kids aren't getting that experience. How do you, what do you think those barriers are? That's one.
That's
education. What are some others?
Opera isn't speaking to people where they are. That's another one for me. I mean, most people in here, like, they've jumped that barrier. But most people who haven't had a relationship with opera, like, they see it as something that doesn't matter to them. It's not relevant to them. It's too expensive. So
Is it too expensive?
It's not. It's not too expensive. But the perception is really important when you're talking about the arts. The perception of opera is that it's a white European art form that is for wealthy people. That's the perception. And no one is doing much to break that perception. And I think that's our job as institutions of the art form, is to break those perceptions and make ourselves available and open.
I think you're hitting on something really interesting. And as we see, there are so many companies at this moment in time that are closing, that are performing less opera, that are reducing their offerings, that are reinventing themselves in certain ways. Is there a crisis in opera?
Is there a crisis? I think there's a crisis in the arts, period, not just opera. I'm not sure we as a society understand the value that arts play in our society. I think we take the arts for granted as, a 30-second TikTok video. Like, that's art to some people. And I think it's the arts is a very delicate ecosystem. I think we talked about this the other day. It's an ecosystem, an exchange of audience trust, audience willingness to allow artists to express something. And companies are closing because there's this imbalance of capitalism. Like, opera is a very expensive art form. And if a company can't take a risk and put something on stage that they think resonates with their audience, then the audience isn't going to buy tickets. Or if a company takes risks and puts something that they value, they think will speak to their community, and the audience isn't familiar with it, they just won't come, they won't buy tickets, and that just constantly puts the organization in a deficit, and they end up closing. So I think we need to get back to, I don't know how we do it without music education in our school system. We need to get back to a value system of what the arts mean to us. And I think we take for granted when we can just put on an album or put on a CD and enjoy, like, music. But it's something special to come to the opera house. And I don't know that we explain that. These singers on stage, they're like the top. They're like the Tom Brady of the arts. And I don't think, as an audience member sitting in the audience witnessing an opera, I don't think we understand everything that these people have gone through to be on stage, to just give you 2 hours of their souls. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and deficit, and debt that goes into just getting on that stage. And if we don't, as an audience, understand the value of that artistry, we just take it for granted.
And so what can we as organizations and artists do to share that story?
We share. We share. I think it's difficult because an artist's role is very different than an arts institution role. The arts institution has to worry about budget. They have to worry about meeting goals. They have a litany of things they have to worry about to remain solvent and keep the machine going. But I think a way to do that is promote artists, put artists up front and let them speak and tell their story and talk about the art form. I don't think we talk about the art form of opera enough. We go and we enjoy the show, but there's not a lot of conversation of what it takes to be up there, and therefore we don't really value it. We take it for granted as an audience member, and even as an artist. I was doing a show with, I won't say his name, but doing a show with a guy who was singing Wotan in a production. Wotan is Wotan. It's like the peak of artistry in opera. Wagner, big singing. And I asked him if he felt like an artist. And his answer was surprising to me. He said he didn't feel like an artist, he felt like a cog in a wheel. Because he just gets up there and he regurgitates and he has to sell tickets, he has to do all of this stuff. But there's no artistry happening in his soul. And I think we need to get back to valuing what arts mean to us as a society, and artists even. It's difficult when you're dealing with when a company tells you you can't do this production because we can't afford it, which then kills creativity, which then kills the art form, which then we keep seeing the same operas over and over again. And I don't think an audience understands that what you see on stage is a direct reflection of what you've proven that you're willing to pay for. And that's why you keep seeing Giovanni over and over again. It's why you keep seeing La Boheme over and over again, because a company knows that you're willing to buy those tickets. And they can't take a risk on doing something that could be beautiful, it could be expressive, it could change your life, but they can't take the risk because they don't know if you're going to buy tickets to it. So we have to trust organizations as institutions of learning, institutions of creativity, institutions of providing something of value to us as a community. And if we don't trust our organizations by buying tickets and being willing to go and open ourselves up to, then the institution will crumble, it will fall.
I'm going to come back to that statement, but I want to go back to something you said earlier, and that was telling the story of artists and the art form.
Yeah.
I also think that arts organizations have failed in their own right by not sharing the business side of that,
Of
right?
course.
The economic side of that. Seattle Opera is the biggest arts employer in this state.
Mm-hmm.
The art, science, and heritage sectors in this county bring more economic stability to the region than all of the professional sports teams combined.
Yeah.
And so I think that we as organizations can do better at telling the folks with business minds and financial minds those stats, as well as we start to bring them in and then can tell the
Absolutely.
story of the art form.
I think the audience has to know their role in this. Like, this doesn't work without them. Like, it's a delicate ecosystem. Like I said, it's a delicate ecosystem where everyone plays a part.
So I'm going to go off script. Alex, do we have other mics? Oh, they're all the way up top. But that'll give you guys a moment to think. I'm going to ask you guys a question. What is the audience's role in this? What is your role to make sure that the art form continues in a way that that is interesting and exciting and intriguing? Elizabeth?
I'm glad to be using your mic because I want to start by talking about you. I have been I have been so impressed by the way that you have reached out into communities and organizations and gotten them excited about opera. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is how can we all be ambassadors for opera? And what can you do to help us with that, to help us spread the joy of opera, to get people excited and get them to come and get them to be, starting to be part of the community?
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think Kenneth and I were talking about that just yesterday at dinner. This is everyone's job, right? Being an ambassador for opera. If you support this organization and by coming to a show or by coming to these talks or by bringing your children to one of our summer camps, you have to also tell that story. And I think that is something that we're really working on as an organization, is being a better neighbor, being a better part of our community. Right here.
We buy subscriptions. That's the most important part.
Yeah, I agree. Buying subscriptions, showing up. And not everyone can afford subscriptions, but there are other ways to attend the operas, and you can attend every opera by buying single tickets also. But I think that is exactly right. Coming to the opera, bringing a friend with you, bring someone who has never seen an opera.
It's interesting. I talk to like people who love opera, and one of the things I wanted to do as artistic ambassador is to have a conversation with an opera lover, because we never get that perspective, you know? We always get the artist perspective and we're giving, but it's a give and take, you know? We have to know what drives you to come to the theater. We have to know what you love about the art form so we can then therefore produce more of what you love. And right now, our only measure of that is how many tickets you buy. You know, we don't really know. So I think that exchange and being a part of the community is really important so that you have a pulse of what's important, and therefore the art can reflect what's important to the community.
Which is why I opened this conversation up to you guys. No.
Yeah.
Right here.
We had the privilege of being at the opening night of X, and I don't remember an event in the arts in Seattle that had so much energy. It was an event, and people were there, and there was diversity that you don't unfortunately see at a lot of events, but there was an energy and an excitement, and people were dressed to the nines. It was a true event. So I think, congratulations to you both. But I think that shows what can be done and can create an energy that you don't normally see in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that goes to being an ambassador, to building those relationships in communities and not just saying that you're doing it, but actually being there and supporting other organizations and folks in the community. It's not always about Seattle Opera, right? We're a member of this community. We are an institution in this community, but we don't always have to be first. We can go support others' events. We can go. We can spread the words of others, of other stories, and I think that's what we hope for Kenneth to do, and for us to continue doing.
Mm-hmm.
Judy?
And I think that we're a community of communities. And I think there's a lot of communities who don't feel that they're there, that they have anything to do with it. And think how many of our greatest hits have come out of regional opera.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Champion right now because it was so moving. And that's a connection with the community that yielded a really powerful work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important thing for us to think about too. What communities are we not reaching?
Yeah.
Dodra?
Yes, and it's under the same topics. It's like how to engage, it was incredible what also you did for the Afghan community, the community events here, and we have discussed about how to serve other underserved communities, like how to engage the Latino communities, how to engage other communities that they would like to be exposed. For some communities, this is something that is very difficult to attend and to imagine to participate. So we would love to be ambassadors as well and do that, but I think that will change the story and the narrative of engaging and bringing more participation. And I'm also imagining how can we engage kids to become you. So in all these schools all over, and you are doing an amazing job, but how can we be more active and to have a very specific plan of how we want to reach in 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, I think pipeline's one of the biggest things. I think we have one more over here, and then we'll move on. But thank you all for this, because I think, as Kenneth said, hearing from our constituents, our community, is what we need. to do this work?
Yeah, I think it's at this point piggybacking on what this lady was saying, because you mentioned that there's no more music classes in school, and that just blew my mind. I guess I'm way out of touch at this point. My kids are 22 and 19, but is there have you ever done assemblies in school or something like that? Like, I can imagine me as as a child and seeing an opera, and especially seeing myself reflected in opera and what an impact that might have on me. I'm wondering if that's ever something that you've thought about or done, or is it a possibility?
Sorry. So I met with kind of the education team today that does that work, and there's a robust program here in the schools, in the school system. And they do a lot of great work. They invite hundreds of kids for programs in the school. But one of the problems that they mentioned today was getting, black and brown kids to participate in those programs. And a lot of the programs that come from arts organizations tend to be performance-based. And what I suggested today in the meeting was, getting up to sing in front of an audience takes a lot. It takes a lot to get to that point. It's almost worse than the fear of public speaking. So the way I like to address getting kids into the art is just this freedom of being able to express whatever you can, whatever you want to express, you can express it in art. So finding a way to loosen them up in that regards, and then finding that expression in music, or finding it in some other realm of art. I think it's difficult to go into a school system and just be like, here sing or here perform. And there's a certain openness that most kids have to go there that our society just doesn't allow anymore. So I think giving kids the freedom to be themselves and freedom to open up in an artistic way is a great entry point for kids.
Yeah, and I think you were hinting at what we do here, and I think we do a great job of that in this building, right? But we bring students, we do a youth opera every winter. We just performed Rutabaga Country, and we'll perform Robin Hood next year with 50 students on this stage. And so I think that is an opportunity for them to explore. And but how do we? There aren't many black and brown kids coming to Seattle Center to do that. It's hard to get here in public transportation. Parking's expensive. There's lots of reasons for that. How do we take those programs out into schools? We do have a robust school tour that we do, and that is a fully staged opera with set and costumes, 4 singers. We take a piano and we perform that all over the state of Washington. This year, 63 schools and reached 18,000 students. And so we're trying to do that work, but we as arts organizations can't replace music education. And I just want to clear up one thing, and that is that the Washington State Legislature made arts and music education a core subject, so legally every school has to provide arts and music education. What they didn't do was give funding for it, because they already give funding for core subjects. And so they've made them core subjects, but they've given no one the money to support that. And so many schools are just breaking the law and not offering it because they can't afford it. Seattle Public Schools is $100 million in deficit next year. So there's the issue.
That's a barrier.
So hearing some of these folks, do you think we've lost our way in this industry?
I don't think we've lost our way in the industry. I will say I think the ecosystem is out of balance. I will say that. And it hints to the thing I spoke about earlier is often now, if you don't have the money, then nothing gets done. And the money that is put towards something, people want something very specific done with that money. So then it limits what an arts organization or what an artist can do. If I'm an artist and I have this need to express something that I think will resonate with people, and a funder says, "Oh, I'm not going to give you money for that," then like what like what happens? So we begin to limit ourselves in our expression because it's not going to garner the funding of an organization. So I think we need to get back and understand what it means to be an artist. And that's one of the questions I've been asking myself. What does it mean to be an artist in today's society? And I don't know that we really value it. And I don't know that we really know what it is now, because it's all about getting clicks and likes and how much money can I garner from just expressing myself. So yeah, I think it's out of balance. I think opera, we're producing opera, we're making opera. We do it, we have seasons, opera companies are producing, but I think what we're allowed to produce and what we are producing is limited based on funding, which I think is, it's a delicate balance for me.
Right, and there's no public funding.
And there's no public funding, no.
Of the arts. I mean, Washington State is one of the lowest funders of the arts. I think Mississippi funds the arts more than Washington State.
Yeah.
Let's back up. The last 2 days, you've been talking a lot about what is the culture of opera, who's responsible for shaping that.
Yeah.
I guess by extension, who's responsible for making sure that opera companies put on performances that connect with everyone.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on all of that?
So I can't really give you an answer. I mean, my perspective of what the culture of opera is going to be very different than another person's. I mean, I'm an insider to opera. But I pose this question on Facebook, on my social media pages, to people who weren't in opera, because they could give you a better indication of what the culture of opera is than I can. And those opinions really matter, because those are people we want to come into the opera house. And some of the answers were hilarious. One guy said, the culture of opera is ruffles, opera glasses, and whatever happened in the movie Amadeus. And that was it. That's what he saw the culture of opera being. Another person said, it's a European art form for rich white folks. And that's the perception of what we do. And even people within the industry, like, opera is racist. They don't give opportunity to other people. And if this is how the broader public sees what we do, then we have a really big problem. We have a problem, and that's our job, to dispel those myths and to create the culture that we want to see opera expressed in.
Yeah, and I think the way to undo this stigma is all the things we've been mentioning. Arts education, public funding.
Yeah.
One other thing is audience expectations, right?
Audience is the biggest ambassador for opera. I mean, you say it's
or
it's
not
hard.
sometimes.
Or not. Yeah, or not. But the fact that they've come into the building and they've opened themselves up to the art form, if you love it, spread it. And you can spread it faster than I can. Your communities are more vast than mine. Like, I'm only here once or twice a season, if that. Like, you're here every day. This is your company more than it is my company.
And what I mean by or not is there are still folks who are very unwelcoming, right? When someone who comes to the opera and doesn't understand the norms of opera, they're shushed, they're yelled at, I've literally seen people scream at people. It's sometimes that our audiences can be unwelcoming and make people not want to come back. So I think spreading this word and this expectation for our audience to be ambassadors just as much as the administrative staff in the opera or the artists or even the crew backstage. I think everyone being an ambassador is one of the most important parts.
So when an audience member comes to the opera for the first time, the first thing that they see is other audience members. And that's where they take their cues from. Oh, this person's like, I'm so underdressed because this person is dressed this way.
Not necessarily in Seattle, but
I mean, maybe not, but I mean, there are people who come to the opera and they look around and see what the expectation is. So if they come back next time, they'll fit in with the crowd, or they won't come back because they feel like they can't and won't fit in. So your job in establishing the culture is more important than mine is, because I'm going to be in costume. Like, I'm going to be singing. Like, my role and my job is set. How I talk about opera, how I go about opera, my professionalism, doing a great job, like, those things are important. But when it comes to establishing what opera is for a community, that's the audience's job.
And your extensive travels, I know that you were singing Beethoven 9 last week, or earlier this week or last week, and you
Like
were
4 days ago.
in Calgary last week.
Yeah.
And your extensive travels as an opera singer, where do you see opera companies succeeding in this work? Because not everyone's doing that poorly at it. I think there are many examples of success also.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard question, because there's a lot of arts organizations that are suffering. And I had a meeting with an executive director, and like, I wanted to go in and talk about all these philosophical things about art, and all she could talk about was the budget and the deficit. And I was like, okay, like you have to deal with that. You can't really deal with these esoteric ideas about art. But I will say, I just worked with a conductor who was conducting the Beethoven's Ninth. And the difference that I felt from him was I could tell that he led with his heart. Like, it mattered to him that everyone in the audience felt something. And whenever I go to an organization, I can feel that. I can feel when the administration and the conductor and everyone in the building cares about what's being done in the building. And I think those organizations are the ones that are thriving. When they care about the art form, they're willing to take risks with the art form. They put the art form above everything else. Those are the organizations that I find are thriving, and there's an energy and there's a life into them that, when the company's not doing so well and struggling, it's like, okay, let's just get through this and hope we sell enough tickets to do the next show. Like, leading with the heart and a belief in the power of the art form is what thriving organizations are succeeding at.
I guess I want to open the conversation to the audience again, but what else would you like to hear from the community? What would you like to know?
I'm guessing everyone here is an opera lover or seasoned opera lover. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. I see my professor here, actually, from undergrad. Absolutely. And I had this amazing conversation with her when we did Das Rheingold. And she told me this story of her journey with Wotan, and her husband was a singer, and like all these things that really mattered to her. And I think those stories are just as important as my story. And I would love for her to share her story about why she loves opera, her experience with Wotan and the Ring Cycle. Like, the most impactful things for me as a singer is to hear the impact that it has on an audience. And we don't often get to hear those things. Like, as a singer, after I do performance, most often singers run to the newspaper to get an idea of what the reviewer had to say about the performance. And that is a hallmark of if I've done a great job or not. Which is, it's sad. It's horrible, because I just shared my heart with thousands of people in the audience. And the only feedback and the only thing that I really, really is telling about what I did and how I did it is one person's opinion in a newspaper. And that travels all over the country. And if I don't read reviews after opening night. I wait till like 2 months after, because I don't want it to to color how I go about the performance. But hearing this story, and I've only heard it twice when I've talked to two people and they talked about why they come to the opera. It's really important.
And I think this is important. And there's a reason why I'm bringing you guys into this conversation, because an ambassador is someone who acts as a representative, right? Someone who shares stories. I think that we both need to hear from you also. We need to hear your love of opera, your thoughts of community, and where opera's headed. I think that is, it's a give and take.
It happened today with Glenn. Like, that conversation was amazing.
Yeah,
But
Glenn, our associate director of
you
communications.
ask questions about, how a person really feels about the art form, and I couldn't deny his experience. Like, that's, how do you sell that?
Right.
How do you get that out into an audience?
So would you mind sharing your story?
How long do you have?
We have a minute.
Oh, okay. Then we should talk about Chopin's Minute Waltz. I guess I better use this. I've known Ken Kellogg since the early 2000s. He wasn't my voice student, but I had him in all of my lyric diction classes at Ohio University when he was a baby opera singer. And it's so gratifying to see the artist that he has become, of course. I'm from here, although my husband and I left in 1983 when there was a regime change at Seattle Opera on a sort of 28-year odyssey around the country, working, performing, teaching, mentoring, and various other things that one does to remain gainfully employed in the arts. My husband was Lincoln Clark. He was resident stage director here from 1974 to 1983. And it was during those years that the concept of a Pacific Northwest Wagner Festival became a reality. And I was a singer, lyric mezzo-soprano, and Wagner is not on my resume at all. But when I first came to the first ring, which I think was in 1975, it was quite an amazing experience as an audience member. After meeting my husband here and finding out that I was going to be very much involved, not as a singer, but as a supporter of someone who was very much involved in the production of that first Wagner festival. I soon learned that there is a kind of reaction that one has to Wagner, that it affects you subcutaneously, if I can put it that way. And it transcends language, for sure. You've spoken about that, Kenneth. We often hear the expression that music is the international language, but I would refute that. I think what happens in opera is that it transcends language. It expresses the inexpressible. And I think that's something that we can communicate to these young people that we want to bring into the opera. That there's a point at which words leave off and you have no other choice but to express it through music and to, does that work for you?
No, I just said
No,
that.
absolutely. He said that in a meeting earlier today.
Yeah, and so I think without turning this to politics, there's something about the efficacy of grassroots efforts in the political world that seems to resonate and is successful, and I think we can do that. We can become more active in our communities and bring people to a realization that there's something for everyone in this art form, and it's a very malleable art form. Obviously, it lends itself linguistically it lends itself culturally. And I think, of course, bottom line and making the whole thing work financially is extremely important. But for me, the future is in taking chances with brand new works that have never been heard before. There was a time when opera was kind of being propped up by the concept of updating standard works, and it's still very much with us, perhaps more in Europe than it is here in the States. But I think the thing that will bring people more into the opera is seeing new works rather than trying to kind of wrench a traditional story around something that is more relevant in the news or, in the regionally or whatever. Let's take new works and say, this is what this art form can be. And this is why you need to come and be a part of this as an audience member.
I think those new works are it's a trusting of the audience to trust an artist. So we have to trust artists. If we don't trust an artist to do what an artist does, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
And I'm a lover of new works, but I also have to say that we also have to do the traditional works.
Oh, absolutely.
Not everyone.
For
and
sure.
No, and I'm not. I know you're not saying that, but
No.
I think that we have to expose people. Us and the P&P, the Programs and Partnerships team, we always talk about our goal, and our goal is to have every person in the region experience opera once. That's all we need to do. That is our goal as the Programs and Partnerships team. Not everyone's going to love opera. There are going to be people who hate opera and never come back. But they don't know unless they see it. And they may like one opera and not another.
Yes, right.
Which there are plenty of operas I don't like, and I do this
You
for a
can
living.
say that about many opera lovers.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily love every opera. But
Yeah, and so I think that it's a great point. Thank you.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Godra down here, and then John.
I'm just thinking about something that maybe is not relevant, but it's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm thinking about Dudamel. I'm thinking about El Sistema. I'm thinking about how they changed the narrative and how we have kids and young adults all over the country getting immersed into music. And, how can we do something similar?
The thing I love about Dudamel is you can tell. Like, I've never met him. I've never worked with him. But you can tell that he leads from his heart. And I think that's, like, every video I see of him, like, there's a joy watching him conduct. And, it's infectious. And I think we don't, one, that's hard to commodify. It's hard to, like, make that the culture of a business. And I think that's also why we need to let artists be artists and express themselves in ways that artists do. And I don't think opera companies use artists to the fullest potential. I think artists come in, they do a show, they may do an interview about that one show, and then they're gone. You may not see them ever again, or maybe 2 or 3 years later. So they aren't really allowed to be artists. We come in and we do a show, we sell tickets to that show, we talk about that show. We don't talk about what it means to be a vehicle for expression when it comes to the art form.
Yeah, I think you and I spoke about something the other day about how artists, there are no more sort of household name
Absolutely,
opera
no.
singers. The most recent is probably Renee Fleming. Folks who outside of opera lovers know.
Yeah.
And so the question I ask, and we don't have to answer this right now, but how can our organizations help to celebrate artists more, knowing our current business models, or changing our business models to celebrate artists in a more substantial way? We don't have to answer this now.
Yeah, but it's important.
That's a whole nother opera talk.
That's
but,
a whole nother
John?
But that's important. That's how we connect with the broader audiences.
I've forgotten what I was going to say now. I was thinking about your comments about being an ambassador. I'm close to losing friends. I talk so much about opera that they're throwing me out. But you bring up so many interesting points. I'm sure I could talk to you for hours on this. But the one I wanted to concentrate on was this building, which I think is the crown jewel of Seattle Opera. And what it can do. It's an almost unique building. And I'm pleased to say, and I'm leading into what I wanted to say now, I'm pleased to say that a representative from Olympia is coming in to see the building later on this month, and it's going to do a tour through, and we'll make him feel as comfortable as possible. What can we do to get the legislator and the politicians and all the people to realize that what we bring to a city, it can be very, very profitable for them, as opposed to just entertaining for the residents of the citizens of the city. So, in your role as the ambassador, how can we do better job with the people who use public money, and we can take advantage of it?
I mean, I think you have to show the value in it. I mean, you have to do the work, and you have to prove that it matters to people. People pay for, and the government especially pays for what they see has an effect on people, and is moving culture, is providing a service for people. I think I was just talking to Dennis earlier. There's a lot of programming that happens in this building that isn't publicized. There's a lot of things that happen. It's like, that's amazing. Why don't I know about that? So I think if we can be that hub for community, and we can let people know what actually happens here, you'd have a better chance of getting some of those dollars and fundings. And you have to change programming to matter. You have to do things that matter to people.
And I just want to say about the Opera Center, a lot of that, we do a lot of programming. Trust me, I'm here all the time. But I think that what people don't know is that there's also a lot of community events that happen in this space. In this space, the Seattle Chamber Orchestra performs. The Seattle Youth Symphony will have a recital next week. The Puget Sound Concert Opera performs here. So the building is always full of community organizations using the space for free, or if not, for very little. And so that was our commitment when building this Opera Center, was to be a place where community can be together. And I think as we're working towards figuring out how to use a building that we weren't able to use for 3 years, we are continuing to think about how we can be a good neighbor and share the space in an equitable way. I want to go back to what both of you said just really quickly about profitable and value. And I think in our capitalistic society, we've forgotten about the other side of that. It's not always about money either. Mm-hmm. There are profits and values in this art form that people can take home with them that isn't a dollar amount, which is important. But they can take home happiness. They can take home laughter. They can take home a love of music. All these things, the experience of this art form that you can take with you is the thing that is the most inspiring. And how do we change the mindset of our country or of our region, right? To know that the things that you take home from art is more than just a cash transaction.
Absolutely.
I think we had a comment right here.
Hi. I just want to say all three of you, for me, succeeded on what you were all trying to do, because that's why I'm sitting here today. So the Malcolm X Opera was the first opera I've ever went to.
And I think I saw you there 4 or 5 times, right?
I remember.
I think I saw it 3 or 4 times. And then, I went to the post talks. I went to the after talks. I was telling my coworkers. I was in there buying shirts. Someone came to me looking for like a certain size. I said, sorry, I don't work here. You know, I was calling my Aunt Pee-wee and Aunt Gladys, who are in their 80s, telling them I went to an opera and it was Malcolm X. And they were like, get out of here, is what came out of their mouths. I just had a conversation with someone just the other day at the Pike Place Market about the Malcolm X. He didn't know. So it was, for me, the story first of seeing the poster on the Metro bus of Malcolm X. So then that piqued my curiosity. So that's why I'm sitting here, because I went to all those things and then met Ms. Shabazz and renting a car and driving down to, Burien? I mean, Renton, going down there and then running to gather up 4 books, and then I saw you in line. I was like, there's Mr. Kellogg. Like, the entire thing was an experience for me. And honestly, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Wagner. I don't know anything about most operas, because this is what I'm coming in on. It's Malcolm X. So my question to you is, my question is, was this you talked about risk. Was the Malcolm X that was here, was that a risk to have that here?
That's a difficult question.
That's a great question.
It's a great question. Was it a risk? I think when you're doing a new, and Malcolm X was written in 1986, so not brand new, but when you're doing a new work that's not recognized, there is some inherent risk. But with Malcolm X particularly, the name is recognized.
Yeah.
The show had also been in 3 or 4 cities before arriving here with a different cast, but it had been in 3 or 4 cities with lots of critical acclaim. And so for us, we signed on to it before all of those. Yeah. But I think what we do as an organization well is recognize that telling different stories, the stories of our whole community, is important.
Yeah.
And so even though there could be inherent risk in that, I think that we've committed to telling those stories and to telling them through interesting and new ways. And so we're always exploring what that means. It's a journey, right? We have not reached where we should be, but we're somewhere in the middle on that journey. And so I think the conversation in our meetings is more, or it's less about financial risk and more about how do we connect with our community? How do we move this art form forward? We should be the leaders in the change of an industry. So I'm not sure that we would have looked at it as a financial risk or a risk, but I sort of skirted around your question. Yeah.
So I
hope I answered.
I will say that anytime you do a production, you're taking a risk. You don't know if people are going to come. You don't know what ticket sales are going to be like. And most companies plan their seasons like years in advance or a time in advance. And we've gotten to a situation in artistic planning where we look at metrics. We look at metrics of what sold well before, and then it's like, oh, okay, I know that is going to sell, and I know like we're not going to lose too much money doing that show, so we can program that and feel safe about it. Like there are companies that do that. And I was talking about earlier where you see Giovanni over and over again. You see Carmen over again, you see Porgy and Bess over and again, because companies know the metrics on those, and they aren't so much a risk for companies. But if a company puts up a title that doesn't have, the name recognition or an audience is unfamiliar with, then it's a risk for them. It's a risk for them because they don't know, they don't have the metrics, they don't know if it's going to sell well. And I think that's one of the things. An institution has to trust their audience, and the audience has to trust their institution, that the art that's being put on stage has a purpose, it speaks to them, and that exchange of ideas has to be vibrant.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, that trust has to go both ways.
Yeah.
And I think one of the conversations we always have is how to make our audiences curious, right? We don't need everyone to agree with what's on stage.
Yeah.
But how do we make them leave feeling something? Whether it's, I hate that music, or I'm leaving at an intermission, this is trash. Whether it's that or this made me think existentially different about my life.
Yeah.
We want people to think something. I think in our country, this is the issue, right? People have lost curiosity. And so when you stop asking folks questions and when you stop being curious about each other, you lose something. You lose a part of your humanity. And so I think we're trying to bring that back to opera, that curiosity.
Gotcha. So yeah, because it was all the above that brought me in, that has me still talking about it. And if I like something, I mean, I'm in, and I will see it over and over again. So I just wanted to specifically let you know that that was my first opera, and that's what brought me in. And so I'm looking for the post talks and the after talks and the book signing down there, because I'll go and rent a car just like I did. So just letting you know, so you succeeded in getting me in, and I'm going to, stick around and see what other things you have. But when you talk about someone who is so important in our lives, and like my parents' lives, someone during that time frame, those are the unique stories that I'm looking to see.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening.
Thanks, but I also hope you'll come and see Barbara of Seville.
Absolutely.
Because it's a hilarious show, and I think you'll take something, it may be something different than you took from Malcolm X, but you'll take something away from that also. I think we had someone over here first.
Yeah, no, I want to say I think you guys are going to make a great team. We're the Renton School District, and we have music in our schools, and through the Washington Association of Better Schools, we actually a group of people came as part of a tour here for jobs. Like, what does it look like? And you guys did a great job of doing that. And one of the ways to address it is to bring that out. But it's also, I don't think, just about the young people. When you're 18, that's not when you stop. It's getting into the community as well. And I was thinking about, the 3 M's of marketing, the market, the medium, and the message.
Yeah.
And the message part about that space that the artist is expressing and the audience is receiving, and what is the role of the audience? The audience, hopefully, their role is to attend, not just butts and seats, but also to have that piece. And we know that from our brain research that music creates this common wavelength with most of the people in the audience if they're attending. And the marketplace would be something I think might be interesting for the opera, and like go to the audience, right? Where's the audience? Does it have to be a huge stage? Well, maybe just bring a dancer, a singer, and a piano, right? And and some backdrop. Going to places where you don't necessarily see it, and mentioning Duhamel, he goes out and does it in strange places where people are like, what the heck is that? Flash mob opera or things like that. So the other thing to remember, I think, is that we are really lucky. I mean, this is premier opera. The people that we get here, it's cray-cray. I mean, just in terms of the talent that is around. So I want to thank you for deciding to be ambassador for the Seattle Opera. When I first thought about it, I mean, I agree that here the message depends on the audience as well. What's the audience looking for? We have some, when we did the Wagner Ring Cycle, we had people from all over the world, because it's like there's these cult of Wagner that some people like and some people just don't like. And then you get the new ones. I don't remember a tune at all from Malcolm X, nor do I remember any tune when I saw the premiere of Dead Man Walking in San Francisco. And it's just that experience that's great, and getting that experience out to more people in smaller forms and bite-sized forms, not TikTok bite-sized, but these other places would be really good. But I want to also give my appreciation for the great work that you do, getting people to the building, I have, you know, to take from Rossini, you'll probably become Ken Kellogg, key, Ken Kellogg, la, Ken Kellogg, key, Ken Kellogg, la, 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 la.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's before we take your question, I just want to say that Malcolm X was extremely successful. It was the most sold contemporary opera we've ever done. Before that was the one we did before that was A Thousand Splendid Suns. And so when you talk about new work and bringing people in, we are seeing that people are enjoying that. They are showing up.
Well, you can hear me. So to go back in time, my first opera, I think it was 10 or 11. My parents could afford season tickets in the early days of Seattle Opera. They were not wealthy people, but it was much cheaper then, and relative what people made and what people had to spend was very different than now. But so I totally support the idea of making it affordable, or people won't come or can't come. But my father was out of town, so my mom took me to Madame Butterfly. It isn't my favorite opera, but I was 11 and it was fabulous. And it kept me going, and so I kept going to the opera over the years. And part of it, I started to think about, well, why do I still go to the opera? And my husband goes with me, of course, but I realized that opera is the only art form that has singing and lighting and a script and a plot and dancing sometimes. It's all of those things. When they all come together, there's nothing else like it. And I think that is the thing that when I've had a chance to bring friends, that I've encouraged them to see is that this is not like going to a play. This is not like seeing the opera, the Met on a movie screen, which is cool too. It's not like listening to it on your CD, because it's everything all together. And you just don't get that unless you are in the performance. And I totally support what you were saying about just a piano, a singer, and a set, because one of the things I've always loved is the piano recital, or the technical rehearsal. Very simple, basic music, but you get the picture. And even, I like it even better than the dress rehearsal. But I think you could just take that out and people would just be mesmerized, because there's something about it that is all-inclusive and nothing else is like it.
Yes. Yes, and. Last season, we did do one recital that we took around. It performed at the Federal Way Library, at Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center, here in the Opera Center. We will repeat that this season with some of the cast members of Jubilee and some of the cast members of Fifth Avenue Theater's After Midnight, which is a musical about with lyrics by Langston Hughes and music by Duke Ellington. And so we will do a recital in 5 different locations all around the city. Last year, we also took our chorus on tour for the first time ever to Vashon Center for the Arts and to Mount Vernon. And so we are trying. We will always do more. We agree with you, is what I'm saying. And it's good to hear when you're the things you are doing is what the community wants.
Yeah.
I just love it how all different people have all different relationships with opera, including the person in the front just like went to the opera for the first time. That's fantastic. I love that. So people are going to say yes for different reasons. You said yes because the name and the story resonated with you and your family and experience. Great. And in terms of saying yes to new performances and getting audiences to say yes to new performances, some people are going to come because of that, and some people are going to come because they know a name of a performer. And, you know, The Hours was performed for the first time. I was there at the premiere. Why did I sign up and go to New York? Because I love Joyce DiDonato, okay? And I see her on social media, and I see the work she's done in the prisons, and just like, oh my gosh, it's mind-blowing. I love this person, and I want to go to this. And by the way, Renee Fleming is singing so cool too, right? But like Joyce DiDonato was it for me, and I would love to have more experiences. Maybe they're already there, but I haven't taken advantage of them, of little snippets on social media with our performers, so I can feel like now I feel a connection to you, hearing you talk and being here tonight, and I really appreciate that. And what can arts organizations do to help artists' voices be heard so they can become the stars, like our movie stars and basketball stars and whatever that makes big money?
I think what you're hitting on is one of the flaws that I see, or one of the things that I see is very different from what we call the golden age of opera today. I mean, we knew Pavarotti. There was the Bell telephone hour where opera singers were constantly on TV. The Ed Sullivan Show, singers were constantly on TV. You had opera singers on Sesame Street. Like, that was just a normal part of everyday American life. You had singers promoting products. I mean, Pavarotti was, I don't say ambassador. He was a spokesperson for like a coffee. It's like it was a part of our everyday. And I think, well, you've talked about this as well. We don't have stars in the sense that there's name recognition, and whose job that is.
You are a star, Kenneth.
I'm learning. But that's important. I mean, that's how we embed opera and how we embed the importance of arts into our culture, is to meet people where they are. And there's been experiments about branding and value attached to a brand, and why I think it was Placido was a long-time brand ambassador for Tag Heuer, which is one of the most Bolivia. It was the watch. But branding and how you talk about the art form and the value you show for the art form it's really important. It's hugely important.
And stay tuned, because we've talked about some of those exact type things in some of our first meetings, but I can't announce that. We just talked about it 2 hours ago. Right here.
So I'm not an opera lover. I love...
Get out.
All
No, I'm just
I love all arts. I find opera really hard.
Yeah.
Right? Even opera in English, I need to read the subtitles, right? It's the only one where I need to make sure I get there early to read the description in the program to know what the story is going to be about. I would love if there was an opportunity, and I always stay for the after comments, and that's great. I would love if there was a little thing before for the ignorant people to come to explain to me, what am I going to see? Tell me, this part, this is a really hard part.
Well,
really
an hour and a half before every show,
Oh, okay. Well, there
there's
we
a
go.
pre-show talk. My colleague Alex is leading many of them for Barbara of Seville. No, but we recognize those are important. There aren't many companies don't do those before every performance or the post-show Q&A. But I think as we are continuing to build relationships with all of you and with all the folks in our community, those are important. Those touch points, those opportunities to learn more about the art form, to learn more about what you're going to see, to meet an artist, those are important. And so we care about the experience you're having. Someone said it's attending opera, but I think it's a little more than that. I think it's an experience, and there's a relationship between us and you that we have to honor. Yeah. Jonathan Dean also does 101 podcasts for every opera that we're doing. I was supposed to listen to them today for next season, but I haven't listened to them yet. Yeah. The Seattle Opera Podcast, yes.
Thank you so much for this rich conversation. For me, it's difficult to imagine what it would be like to walk into this building for the first time not already being a convert to opera. I've been loving it since I was a kid. My dad's an opera lover, so I've always felt welcome here, and I've always felt like this was something that was relevant to me. For several years, I taught undergraduate music history classes and music appreciation classes, and I definitely got the response of, opera's for old white rich people. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my culture. Why would I even entertain the idea of going to an opera? So what I just want to share is that from that perspective, Seattle Opera as an organization is a very easy sell against that stereotype, because I feel like there's always this sense that we are in conversation with history rather than being beholden to it. And for me, the biggest example of that was the Lindy Hume production of Rigoletto, and the sense of it was sort of advertised as a hashtag #MeToo opera. And it's like, yeah, Verdi wrote beautiful music that a lot of people probably are familiar with without knowing that it's from an opera. They've heard La Donna e Mobile in a commercial or in a movie, they just never knew it was Verdi. But then to show absolutely how relevant those themes are. Yeah. And then the work that was done before you ever got into the auditorium, the displays in the lobby, the printing in the program. I remember there was a big display in the lobby that said, "Why address sexual assault in opera?" And it was that sense of, this is part of a conversation. We're interrogating these things. Or the other one that just blew my mind was the Breaking Glass panel about Porgy and Bess, which Naomi Andre participated in, and the way that people who were here at Seattle Opera were talking about Porgy and Bess's problems and its stereotypes. And they weren't just presenting it as, this is a great piece of music, and that's as far as the conversation can go. The sense of, we're interested in talking about these things and pushing and pulling against these things. So for me, it's really easy to tell people, this may have been your stereotype about opera, but come try Seattle Opera before you've made that assumption rigid. So thank you. Just thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yeah, I debated if I was going to say this or not, but there aren't many, oh, the lights changed behind us at some point. There aren't many, it wasn't too long ago that you wouldn't have seen two black men on a stage at one of the top 10 opera companies in the country, leading a conversation like this. And so I'm not saying that to praise Seattle Opera, but to praise the change that is happening within the industry. There was a question over here, Elizabeth. You have a mic already.
Venue matters. A venue that really counts for people. I think the fear that folks have of opera is similar to the fear that folks have of Shakespeare. And I'm thinking of Seattle Shakes down the street that brings Shakespeare in a stripped down, very accessible version out to city parks in the summer. Mm-hmm. Is there some way that opera can do that? Can you do a Wood-No opera, stripped down, maybe even recorded music with some partial scenery and amazing singing out?
Well, you can see a full opera, Monkey and Francine in the City of Tigers, in 4 city parks and in Auburn this summer. Yeah. With 4 singers, a piano, and set, and costumes.
I will say to that, though, I mean, it's great to have, I think every opera company goes out into the public and does a production of some sorts. That's just like a standard base for outreach programs. But there is something special about being in the opera house. Like that exchange, like these buildings are specifically built acoustically for that experience. So I don't want it to diminish the value of bringing people in. Like that is a must, and it's an experience unlike any other.
I agree with you. However, I feel that you have to meet people where they are.
No, I'm not saying, I'm saying yes, do those. Those are important.
Yes, and.
Yes, and. Like the experience you'll have in an opera house with a full orchestra.
It's life-changing.
Unamplified voice singing over top an orchestra is unlike any experience you'll get anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think we also have to do a good job of talking about the experience, not just all of these wonderful things. But people who've never been to the opera don't know that it's unamplified voices. They don't know that there are translations above you.
60 years.
And they don't know these things. People don't know Seattle Opera exists. You don't know how many times I'm out. We're one of the largest opera companies in the country. People don't know it exists. And I swear, every corner I turn, there's a Seattle Opera billboard right there. But people don't know. And so how do we share that story? And that's part of what you're going to do and what we're trying to do every day.
Yeah.
Right. I think we have Elizabeth back. I have time for two more questions. Elizabeth?
Just a simple idea that I heard actually from someone else, which was about how to help people feel more welcome, first-time attendees to feel more welcome, and that was to have the patron lounge be shared with the first-time users lounge. So people who are coming for the first time get to go to the patron lounge, and everyone in there welcomes them and is excited to see them, so that they can immediately feel like, oh, this is a home and this is a place where I want to be.
Now, to that point, when you talk about the culture of opera, and what I was saying, and everyone's experience is different. Someone who can pay $500 for a ticket will have a very different experience coming to the opera. They'll get the lounge, they'll get the champagne, they'll get the wining and dining, and they'll come back, of course. Like, I've had that experience when I come back. But the person who can't afford a subscription, like, they're coming in, they're uncomfortable, they aren't feeling welcome. They see, it's like sitting in first class. You see someone sitting in first class, you're going back to coach, and it's like there's a disconnect, So I think if you can create an overall experience where everyone is welcome and everyone gets more or less the same experience, it's hard with money, and that exclusivity is a thing in opera, which is part of the problem. Exclusivity, getting benefits, getting perks, it's built into the business of what we do, but I also think it's a hindrance to those first timers coming back and really having that experience of, wow, that was the opera. Like, I just experienced that.
Yeah, and I think we've dabbled in that quite a bit. Many, if not all, of our first-timers get a personalized note in their seat when they come to the opera. Our staff walk through every seat and put a personalized note. Many times they are invited to the lounge, or at least given a free glass of wine. I think you're right in that we need to make the experience for those folks. It keeps coming back to experience and community, and I think that is what it's good to hear it confirmed. You can if you turn the mic on.
I want to change the subject just for a moment, and maybe we can close out with this. But we've talked a lot about the nuts and bolts and the dollars and cents. But my question for Kenneth is, have you ever made anyone cry from your singing? And what was the setting? And yeah, can you tell us that story? Because the nuts and bolts are nice and fine,
Absolutely.
but the emotion of the art experience is what people carry home with them.
Yeah.
So, have you ever made anyone cry?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
John raised his hand. You've made John cry.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, so it often happens after performance. Like, Blue was really poignant in that respect because it's such an emotional piece. I was walking from the theater, I'd just done the show, and like just not even thinking. I'd just done the show, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go home and rest. But there's a woman who chased me down, like literally chased me down and grabbed me from the back. And I turned around and I was like, she's like, I just saw Blue, and I have to say thank you. And she hugged me and wouldn't let me go, and started crying. And for me, that is the power of what we do. Those emotions aren't tangible things. The power of the vibration of the voice, the connection that is unseen, you can't touch it, you can't hold on to it, you can't grab it, but it's there. That for me is what is special about the arts and is special about the experience of opera. It has an effect on you. Like, nobody's punching you, nobody's poking you, nobody's tickling you, yet you laugh, you cry, and you feel something. I always say when I go to the theater, I don't care if I'm elated when I leave. I don't care if I'm angry. I don't care if I'm sad. I want to feel something. And if we aren't doing that as artists, then I don't feel like we're doing our job.
And with that, I feel like we've come full circle back to the beginning of our conversation. Thank you, Kenneth, for sharing and for and for accepting this role as artistic ambassador. We're really excited to see the work that all of us can do together. And thank you all for joining us. If you haven't already, please do join us for our 60th anniversary concert this Saturday. We also have Barber of Seville running through May 19th. It's a busy time around here. But please do join us and get home safely and have a good evening.